Greetings. Today is Sunday, January 3rd, and we'll be looking at Genesis chapter 3. The Genesis narrative in the Yahwist voice continues. The first verse says that the serpent is crafty. Introduce this anthropomorphic, again, animal that can talk and can actually reason and hatch a plan to convince Eve to take the apple. So, in this chapter, in verse 20, Adam gets his name. We get to see that he has a name. The man has a name, it's Adam. And he named his wife Eve because she's the mother of everything, every living thing. And, but what happens over the course of this chapter is that they get expelled from the garden. And this is this passage, this chapter that people, use into antiquity to justify a lot of things, and calling it the fall of humanity and original sin. But what happens essentially in this chapter is it's the story of this man and this woman in the garden with God, and they eat from the tree God told them not to eat from. They disobey God. And then they hide from God, and then God turns up like Terry Gross almost. He asks them several questions all in a row. First one is, where are you? He's looking for them in the cool of the evening. They used to meet, I guess, and walk together. And he says, God says, where are you? And God finds them, and God asks, what did you do? And keeps asking questions until God can get to the bottom of this. And then God starts to make edicts upon their life about how difficult it's going to be, and then gets a little nervous about them eating from the tree again, perhaps, I guess, and sends them out of the garden. And then puts a celestial bouncer there, an angel with a flaming sword, so that the garden would be surrounded and they couldn't get back in. And that's the story. I wanted to look to a resource to help us frame this a little differently. It's a very familiar story, but so I'm actually looking at a book that my sister-in-law gave me to look at. It is from the Reverend Jan Richardson. She's a member of our conference, and she was my camp counselor when I was a kid. And now she's a colleague. She's an amazing person. She's way artist and pastor and theological mind, and she wrote this beautiful book. Well, she wrote several books, but this is for reflection and prayer, and she's reflecting on this story that we just read for chapter 3. She says, for a while I've had a sneaking suspicion that on those occasions when we're tempted to hide ourselves, to turn our eyes from the world around us, it's not because it's so terrible, but because it's so stunning. I once commented to someone that I thought that it was a wonder that anyone else makes it through life sober. Even with its pain, its brokenness, and its terrors, the world that God wrought is astonishing. It should come to no surprise that so many of us look for ways to turn down the volume, to insulate ourselves from the impact. It's too much to take in. Genesis tells us that after Adam and Eve ate the fruit, the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made loincloths for themselves. Many have read this and assumed Adam and Eve did this because they felt shame. What if it wasn't their shame that drove them to guard themselves, but rather their beauty? What if seeing each other with eyes wide open was too overwhelming to bear? To fully see and be seen is dazzling and fearsome. Adam tells God, after all, I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked. and I hid myself. To see as Eve and Adam did after their eyes were open is a difficult thing to sustain. Thomas Merton once wrote, "There is no way of telling people that they are walking around shining like the sun. Yet, as he knew, to make the attempt is part of our wondrous and terrible vocation. We are called, in this broken world, to open ourselves to the beauty that persists, to allow ourselves to see and to be stunned." In this, Adam's hiding himself from God, and they both hid from God. And she sees the beauty in all of creation, even in the pain and the suffering that we experience. And when you read this, I hope you won't get hung up on the theology that was created from it, born out of it, and just read the story on its own measure for itself, and read it from several translations and look at the differences in the words and look at the immense beauty of the relationship between humankind and the divine. I hope you'll have a beautiful day.